Need to Take Action by Zen Gardner, published recently. I read this article yesterday. I was having trouble with my computer and went offline to read it. It seems that every time Microsoft updates the software, my computer slows down. Is Microsoft putting pressure on us to buy new computers? A viewer warned me not to update, but there isn't such an option. You can update now or postpone for 4 hours. You can't opt out of the updates, it seems. Nazi-like, do you agree? Anyway, I unplug from the internet whenever I feel the forces of evil are taking over my computer, and that's what I did when I pulled up this page to read it. The cursor is unresponsive. If I open folders, they won't open. If I'm typing a reply to a YouTube comment, the letters don't appear. Maybe you're having the same problems. Since the computer was off, I had no chance to roam and read, so I just read this article 2 or 3 times and found it to be written as if author Zen Gardner and I are brothers raised in the same household and sharing many of the same ideas about the governing conspirators who plot every minute of every day because they don't work. They live off us, parasites of the same species. I think Zen Gardner knows what's going on in the world, and I'm in full agreement with what I'm about to read to you. When I tried to find the article again, I went to the website wariscrime.com and couldn't find it. When I read a Zen Gardner article, it's usually at War is Crime, but it was not there. I thought maybe they killed him and removed all the evidence that he ever existed. Then I recalled reading articles also from Novedades Semanales, and so I went there, started reading the titles of the articles, and whop, that is. Written April 13th, 2015. Today is April 23rd, 2015, and so this article is just 10 days old. I will provide the link, and when you go to this page, there is a link to Zen Gardner's page. You can see it in blue in this image. Read everything this man writes because he knows what's going on. And he's trying to do something about it by writing articles for his own page, and that gives Novedades Semanales, War is Crime, and other websites a chance to pick it up and help us with our cause to spread truth so we can all be free again in America and the world. Zen Gardner writes articles, recommends that you spread the truth. He does not, however, tell you what to do. And so as I read this article, I'm going to give you my ideas. And then you have the ideas of 2. You might already have some ideas about what to do, and you can use those too. The title, How Much Evidence Do We Need to Take Action? Suggests that we, the people, are not taking action. We don't need a whole lot of matches to start a big-ass fire, you know. Just a few will do if you know what to do. The Navy did a study and found that when 10% of the population has the belief, it is the tipping point. And the rest soon will convert to the new way of thinking. All we need, people, are 10%, and we're there. Change will come about. We want the Fed to end and the IRS mafia to vanish. We want the Nazis in government gone, and we want to dismantle the New World Order. I think much of the world is on board on these issues. But you have some that will say that the IRS builds roads and bridges, and they are unaware that the IRS has never built a road or bridge in over 100 years of taking money from the people. The IRS isn't even constitutional, and the way the 16th Amendment was passed and interpreted is criminal, to say the least, and there has been a 100-year campaign to coerce, intimidate, threaten, and jail people who don't file a weaponized 1040 tax return. Conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion is appropriate for the IRS, but few recognize what they have done over the years and how Congress just looks the other way. The resistance to abolishing the IRS is deep-rooted in this roads and bridges fantasy. How do you make these assholes aware? That's what this article is about, making others aware. Zen Gardner doesn't tell us how to do that, but I will. Some say it's a suicide mission because our common enemy has so much power and control. Whatever. Zen Gardner does a marvelous job of pointing out the fronts in this undeclared war against the people, and he recommends action but fails to tell you how to respond. He's basically blaming the victim for not taking decisive action. What I have been advocating is to spread the truth, and I give some ideas about how to do that. I do the math and show you how just 10 messages of truth daily can result in millions knowing about your discoveries and your position on things of import, if you include some lines about why it is so important for we the people to pass on messages of truth. And Zen Gardner says exactly the same thing. That's why I consider him my brother in thought, anyway. We the people have enormous power. How do I know that? Because we the people are 7.3 billion on this planet, and we can kick some serious ass. Your role is small. You broadcast to 10. That's all. You do it on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or LinkedIn. There are more than 200 other social media networks. And if you want the entire list, go to Wikipedia, type in social network, and you'll find what I found, a list of 211 social networks all over the world. And you can join many of them and expand your broadcasting capability. The enemy has powerful tools: the media, the laws, the armies, and governmental control. We have already lost all those battles, but we have a front where we can gain a stronghold: the internet and little messages of truth. The internet comes along and the enemy is on that like a fly on dog shit. They were quick to recognize the potential, and we must become aware also. They will use government controls and regulations to block our communications with one another. And their excuse will be terrorism. And so you must point out that all the terrorist acts are committed by them. They lie to us routinely. They consider this a real war. And Zen Gardner is disturbed because they are winning. Everyone needs to become aware, but if it isn't being reported on the Nazi nightly news network, common people don't believe it. It's not reality. The only reality is the one created for them, and they dwell in a tiny little terrarium, as Richard Grove calls it, and they don't roam out of the fenced area, as Stefan Molyneux calls it. The enemy is powerful, and don't underestimate them or disarm because someone told you that their empire is crumbling. They are stronger than ever, and Zen Gardner didn't mention that their empire is crumbling. He's asking, how much does it take to wake the people? Are we already defeated, or are we going to kick some ass? The enemy seems to have everything. There is one thing they don't have, however: people in large numbers. They might number 1 million, but we number 7.3 billion, so we have them beat. Now, what do we do with 7.3 billion people? We apply pressure. We don't start a war because the enemy has us militarily beaten before we begin. They use armies that we pay for against us. So we need to operate on the minds of all soldiers instead, and make them not want to fire weapons against we the people. This war is winnable if we are smart and use words instead of guns. I am under attack. My channel is growing by 1,200 subscribers per month, and instead of my views going up, they are now going down. I was getting over 20,000 views daily, and now it's down to 18,000, and I have more subscribers than ever, so I suspect that invisible hand of the Nazi New World Order at work cutting down on the influence of my ideas and my YouTube channel. You people can help out. You can spread your own version of the truth, and then they will have to attack all of you. And the more of you there are, the better chance we have of winning. The enemy specializes in control. And if you will kindly notice, they control everything with an ever-increasing degree of depth. Our response must be to broadcast one message of truth daily, and that message of truth must be passed on by those who receive it from you. We beat them with geometric growth. The truth must be spread, and more people are beginning to realize that the truth is what's going to finally set us free. Zen Gardner mentions this, but he fails to mention the social networks. He arrives at the same conclusion that I have arrived at, that this is a war of words and ideas, not guns and tanks. It's not about killing anyone, but changing the way others think, and I can't think of a more powerful weapon than the truth. The truth can kick some ass. Zen Gardner mentions the truth in his article, and that's why I say he's like a brother to me in his way of thinking about our political and social situation. I want to point out that the French Revolution was a turning point in history, and there were 5 major causes. Without going into great detail about the issues, I will ask you to permit me to mention one, which is most appropriate right now in our own history. The French Revolution occurred at a time which is called the Age of Enlightenment. And this is one of the reasons for the revolt. Starving people will draw upon the prevailing new ideas and bring about change because they are hungry. Hunger makes them desperate. What does the Nazi New World Order do? They have an agenda to take over all countries of the world and enslave the people. America is targeted. They crash the economy and lie about the unemployment rates. If 1/3 of the labor force is on food stamps, 47 million out of 156 million, the unemployment rate is at least 30%, isn't it? The Nazis are telling us that it's only 5%. They build FEMA camps in anticipation of the people's revolt, knowing very well that the people will be starving as the Nazis take over all power, all governments, and confiscate all wealth. When I first started talking about FEMA camps, people said I was nuts. Now they are nuts. Everyone is nuts because the FEMA concentration camps are as real as Hitler's death camps like Auschwitz. And no wonder, it's the same Nazi mentality that prevails in America in positions of control today. We are beginning to see through the fake elections and the efforts to concentrate power. I found the word yoke in something I read and thought it was a good word to describe what's happening to us. They are trying to yoke us like oxen to the wagon they want us to pull like slaves. They are turning all of us into slaves, and if we don't recognize it, it will be much more difficult to do something about it, as Zen Gardner recommends in this article. And with that introduction, let's get into the article. I have questions. Life is wonderful, full of amazing wonders that continue to unfold. My quest for truth has given me new perspectives, which lead to well springs of information that continue to inspire awe and wonder at the world we live in. Dare to explore and see what leaves you just wondering. Zen Gardner. The news pouring in daily about how we're scammed, poisoned, and domineered by big food, big pharma, big oil, big corporations, and Big Brother. It's almost overwhelming. And by the way, he has a link to each one of those, so he might have set up categories on his website, and I recommend that you go there and explore, because I have a feeling that his website is loaded with information. I have not been there. I like to read written articles and pick out the ones that I think are best for reading on my channel. So he names all of these entities, big food, big pharma, big oil, big corporations, and Big Brother, and does not recognize or mention that all of those are owned by the same people. What did Karen Hudes tell us? Out of 43,000 corporations, 147 of them take down 60% of the world's profits. And they're all owned by the same group that cleverly use interlocking executives or board members or whatever it is that they do. And so where did the money come from to buy all of these corporations? It came from a monopoly on the U.S. currency and making the U.S. currency the world reserve currency. So big food is owned by the Fed. Big pharma is owned by the Fed. Big oil, the invasions, the occupations are all about oil. The big corporations are purchased or driven out of business and then purchased. This harassment at the airport that's being done by the DHS and the TSA, do you think that has nothing to do with stealing the airlines? It hurts airline traffic, it hurts profits, and then they buy them when they're in bankruptcy. They took over General Motors, didn't they? Doesn't government own General Motors? Doesn't government own Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae? Aren't the same people involved in Wall Street and own and control everything? Aren't they the ones that manipulate stock prices to take over and control everything? When you start digging, you find out these things, and I'm very surprised that Zen Gardner did not say that all of these are owned by the same people and that the money came from a monopoly on the nation's currency in the USA. And that event happened in 1913. Congress had no right to give away their right to print the nation's currency. And to hand it off to a group of private bankers is insane. And it's been going on for 100 years. It's time to undo that. They already own everything. They already have monopolies all over the place. And you're going to pay $10 a pound for tomatoes. They crash economies and then buy up everything dirt cheap. That's what they did during the Great Depression. Zen Gardner should know this. But he separates them as if they're all separate conspiracies. No, it's one gigantic conspiracy, which involves the Council on Foreign Relations and all these Bilderberger groups. There's so many of them, I can't name them all by memory. That's the agenda, is to make sure that you can't figure it all out. You can't put it all together, because it requires information from everywhere. Zen Gardner should know that Big Pharma is connected to Big Food and Big Oil and big corporations and Big Brother. It's all one happy family, and they're screwing us. They're turning us into cattle. So he lays out the case that these 5 entities, Big Food, Big Pharma, Big Oil, big corporations, and Big Brother, are screwing us, poisoning us, scamming us, dominating us. And he says it's past time to draw some conclusions from all the obvious evidence. This is where the rubber meets the road. There comes a time we need to crystallize all that's being plainly revealed into a very clear picture that brings personal action and a conscious response. The global engineers are enacting a full-spectrum attack on humanity to not just subdue, control, and transform the world's populations, but to reduce it by slowly maiming and killing it off. And he's got another link there if you want to click on to reduce it, and he will probably explain what he means by that. The common awareness of these programs extends to such arenas as, and he's got 5 bullets, weather and electromagnetic warfare, radiation contamination, and a full-on global fracking agenda, full-spectrum geopolitical hegemony, invasive medical and pharmaceutical fascism, with 70% of the American public on some form of prescription drug. You know what Zen Gardner is talking about when he says invasive medical and pharmaceutical fascism. And the 5th bullet, tightening economic vice grip on people's supply lines and their very survival. Everything we read daily points in the same direction. The question before us is, he says it's a question, and then he lists 4 questions. Okay, I'll read all 4. What will we do in the face of such an onslaught? Are we first of all willing to draw some conscious conclusions? Or are we afraid due to the implications of what our personal involvement might entail? And all while our race is clearly being adulterated and exterminated. Well, now I see why he calls that one question, because he's got 4 questions there, but they're all basically one sentence. And then he says, serious personal questions indeed. Courage is the absence of letting fear rule our lives. That's an odd expression, but I understand it. In other words, lose the fear. They're going to kill you one way or another. It would be better to go down as a fighting soldier than as a wuss with your tail between your legs. Doing the conscious and responsible thing is the duty of every living creature, not just activists. Another term used pejoratively to keep people from doing the obvious. And then he's got a picture, the word eugenics across the top, and the Adolf Hitler mentality, which reads, eugenics is the self-direction of human evolution. In the hands of these madmen, that is a dangerous statement that was just made. Okay, let's read what Zen Gardner said. Eugenics, the openly declared usurping elitist agenda. Elitism runs on fundamental tenets, thinking that they are superior and knowing what's best for the world. They have funded and operated think tanks, foundations, institutions, universities, and secret organizations for centuries, in one form or another, to formulate and hone their plans. The scale is massive with these internationalists, and we are the subjects of their experimental implementations. That their aim is to modify as well as reduce our numbers is a repeatedly documented goal of these psychopaths. Thank you. They are psychopaths. Thank you for calling them that. And the next sentence reads, all for control and arrogantly assumed domination of those they consider inferior. After all is said and done, they're not sure of anything despite their hubris. We are a race with qualities they cannot fathom due to their abject lack of empathy and true conscious awareness. despite their metastasized, left-brained so-called intelligence and other intimidating dark machinations and engineered influences. Recent decades have seen a massive proliferation of such elite planning organizations, many operating openly with benign names like the Rand Corporation, the Stanford Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Institute, the Red Cross, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Institute for the Advancement of the Sciences, the Ford Foundation, the Sierra Club, the Jesuit Society of Jesus, and many, many more. Most hypno-zombies don't think anything of such organizations. After all, like the Patriot Act, they must be for our collective good. He's got a misspelling there. Should be our. More profoundly, media manipulation through language sorcery and mem repetition has been extremely successful. Most would never even stop to question anything sounding like an authority on some issue, hence the worship of men in white coats with strings of degrees after their names, trusting talking heads institutions like these and anything sounding credible. And then he's got a picture here, and George Orwell's name is associated with the quote, "The further a society drifts from truth, the more it will hate those that speak it." On this page at the top, you will see that Zen Gardner refers to hypno-zombies, and he says they don't think anything of these organizations. These are inexperienced kids who were raised in a family where their parents care about them, and they think that government is their daddy. Government is your worst monster nightmare. That's the truth about government, and it is implied so in the U.S. Constitution. They didn't tie government's hands because government is benevolent and they want to limit how much good government does for you. They tied government's hands because government is innately evil. And children who think that the IRS builds roads and bridges must have the lights turned on by somebody. Who's it going to be? If you teach your kids to never trust anything government says, you will be doing them a great favor, and tell them to teach their kids the same. We don't need more government. We need no government. When the number of countries in the world equals the number of people in the world, I'll be satisfied. Until then, I will work toward breaking up the power. There is too much power concentrated into the hands of a few, and they distort the truth, and they take us far, far away from the U.S. Constitution, and I want to get back to the Constitution. I feel the Constitution is the right track except for representative government. We no longer need representatives. The Capitol is not a 3-day ride by horseback, and we don't need anybody to play our poker hands for us. We need to play those poker hands ourselves. People would think you're nuts if you entered a poker game with a representative, a congressman playing your hand and dealing with your money, and that's what we have. And why doesn't anybody recognize it as insanity? Why isn't everybody talking about it? Because they have adapted insanity just like the people who go to church and pray to Jesus. This is mental illness, and it's acceptable. And if you ask a kid what happens to IRS money, they say it goes to roads and bridges. It's all a lie. If you start with the assumption that everything is a lie, you're almost 100% correct. When you look back at the history of the human being, all of our beliefs were wrong. All of them. If given enough time, every single one of them proved to be false. And the human being has believed some pretty crazy stuff. But believing that government is benign or benevolent is insanity. So I'm glad to see Zen Gardner calling them hypno-zombies. They're under mind control. In the next paragraph, he talks about media manipulation through language sorcery and mem repetition. So these people study advertising techniques and use them in their propaganda campaigns to control what we think. And so you have everyone ridiculing conspiracy theorists, but there are conspiracies everywhere I have looked. Not just here or there randomly, everywhere. As soon as there's money, there's a conspiracy to get it. So let's read the quote by George Orwell one more time and we'll turn the page. The further a society drifts from truth, the more it will hate those that speak it. The next heading, to the news, Which brings me to the news, he says. Almost hourly, we're reading of the new exposés regarding critical health issues, from the disastrous effects of vaccines and pharmaceutical drugs to the cover-up of what is actually our adulterated and genetically modified food, which they themselves won't touch, as well as our drinking water and the very air we breathe. Well, I made a list of 20 fronts in this undeclared war against the people, and a producer of cable television in Hollywood is a friend of mine, and he asked me for it, and I sent it to him because he was writing something that had something to do with that, and he wanted my list. And so Zen Gardner mentions just a few of the fronts in this war: pharmaceutical drugs, genetically modified foods, our drinking water, and the air we breathe. But that is just barely scratching the surfaces. And he mentions vaccines also. There are articles that doctors kill more people than anything else. And now with the government in charge of your medical, they have all the information, they control all of the drugs. What do you think that's going to turn out? That's going to turn out like the Social Security system, only with dead people everywhere and a morgue that is not allowed to talk. And doctors who will be punished with the revocation of their license if they talk. And so you'll have government killing people routinely to get rid of them because they can no longer pay the IRS. Or their lives are deemed useless, and so they're taken. Kids cannot understand the magnitude of this dilemma that we're in. They own and control everything, and we are slaves. And Zen Gardner says it's the duty of everyone to get involved in this because it's our lives. We have reached the point in development where they can control everything, and they will snuff out the lives of those they deem unworthy of a life. It's not their decision. And so when Zen Gardner is referring to these fronts in the undeclared war against the people, he says that these fronts are not new, but they're bubbling up more and more in the mass consciousness. The world militarization and mass surveillance agenda is another major factor happening concurrently as an obvious manifestation of this globalist agenda. Media complicity is clear, and their influence is waning rapidly as grassroots community actions proliferate. In other words, the alternate news is replacing the Nazi nightly news network. Just the fact that the realistic, awake, and aware perspective of seeing these realities for what they are has been portrayed as conspiratorial. And this puts the control issue way over the top, not just in Orwellian incredulity, but exactly where they want it, in the mass mind. Safely ensconced in frozen, compartmentalized, suspended animation. In plain reality, of course, it's a very real conspiracy. Thank you. And they're clearly executing a stated agenda, one we're fully aware of. Naturally, they have to decry anything that opposes it. What an obvious sham. But again, who's looking? We are. And then he has a picture of people dressed in suits with artificial faces and gloves on their hands, I suppose to make them all look alike. This is what is produced by government control. And by government, you know what I'm talking about. Not the clowns in Washington, the fools and the jugglers. I'm talking about the real government that operates behind the scenes and has a monopoly on the nation's currency. That's the real government. They are the ones that bought up all the best real estate and all the best businesses, and they own them. And they think they're tricking us by having different directors on the board of these corporations. And so the heading says what we're up against. It's a disinformation machine spouting out whatever toxic spew it deems necessary at any given time. Keeping people in the dark is their number one job. Once you catch on to that, you're on your way to mental and spiritual freedom, but it takes some doing, and takes guts to openly see past the green screen projection we're being fed. As someone wisely said, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. Very true words indeed, the author says. Get past that stage and start to activate. Every one of us counts. And he writes a conclusion: if we don't respond consciously to this invasion on our kind, we're not worth our salt. Doing what we can restores confidence and an innate sense of who we are, and spurs many others to do the same. Pass it on and on and on. Passionate communication is the key to empowerment at this point. Never downplay or delay that. All of this is just for starters. The rest is up to you and me. We are massively powerful spiritual weapons of mass construction at our disposal, such as localized community activism. Use them and discover new avenues continually. We're swimming in an ocean of possibility, waiting to be tapped into and manifested. There's nothing more empowering than that, as I see it. Hope you do too. It's a wonderful opportunity for taking the initiative and making a massive difference. Zen Gardner, learn to use commas. They would really help in understanding what you're writing. Learn when a comma is used and use it, because it was difficult to read this article. But I'm on the same wavelength as you, and a lot of us are. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. How Much Evidence Do We Need to Take Action? By Zen Gardner, published recently. I read this article yesterday. I was having trouble with my computer and went offline to read it. It seems that every time Microsoft updates the software, my computer slows down. Is Microsoft putting pressure on us to buy new computers? A viewer warned me not to update, but there isn't such an option. You can update now or postpone for 4 hours. You can't opt out of the updates, it seems. Nazi-like, do you agree? Anyway, I unplug from the internet whenever I feel the forces of evil are taking over my computer, and that's what I did when I pulled up this page to read it. The cursor is unresponsive. If I open folders, they won't open. If I'm typing a reply to a YouTube comment, the letters don't appear. Maybe you're having the same problems. Since the computer was off, I had no chance to roam and read. So I just read this article 2 or 3 times and found it to be written as if author Zen Gardner and I are brothers raised in the same household and sharing many of the same ideas about the governing conspirators who plot every minute of every day because they don't work. They live off us, parasites of the same species. I think Zen Gardner knows what's going on in the world, and I'm in full agreement with what I'm about to read to you. When I tried to find the article again, I went to the website wariscrime.com and couldn't find it. When I read a Zen Gardner article, it's usually at War is Crime, but it was not there. I thought maybe they killed him and removed all the evidence that he ever existed. Then I recalled reading articles also from Novedades Semanales, and so I went there, started reading the titles of the articles, and whop, there it is. Written April 13th, 2015. Today is April 23rd, 2015, and so this article is just 10 days old. I will provide the link, and when you go to this page, there is a link to Zen Gardner's page. You can see it in blue in this image. Read everything this man writes because he knows what's going on. And he's trying to do something about it by writing articles for his own page, and that gives Novedades Semanales, War is Crime, and other websites a chance to pick it up and help us with our cause to spread truth so we can all be free again in America and the world. Zen Gardner writes articles, recommends that you spread the truth. He does not, however, tell you what to do. And so as I read this article, I'm going to give you my ideas. And then you have the ideas of 2. You might already have some ideas about what to do, and you can use those too. The title, How Much Evidence Do We Need to Take Action? Suggests that we, the people, are not taking action. We don't need a whole lot of matches to start a big-ass fire, you know. Just a few will do if you know what to do. The Navy did a study and found that when 10% of the population has the belief, it is the tipping point. And the rest soon will convert to the new way of thinking. All we need, people, are 10%, and we're there. Change will come about. We want the Fed to end and the IRS mafia to vanish. We want the Nazis in government gone, and we want to dismantle the New World Order. I think much of the world is on board on these issues. But you have some that will say that the IRS builds roads and bridges, and they are unaware that the IRS has never built a road or bridge in over 100 years of taking money from the people. The IRS isn't even constitutional, and the way the 16th Amendment was passed and interpreted is criminal, to say the least, and there has been a 100-year campaign to coerce, intimidate, threaten, and jail people who don't file a weaponized 1040 tax return. Conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion is appropriate for the IRS, but few recognize what they have done over the years and how Congress just looks the other way. The resistance to abolishing the IRS is deep-rooted in